In an industry where selling 3.4 million copies of a title can be considered disappointing, breaking through the constant stream of new heavy-hitting games is no mean feat. So how did Bluehole, a developer with no real track record with shooters, sell 13 million copies of Battlegrounds as of today on PC alone? Selling tens of millions of copies of a game is usually reserved for mainstream franchises with price success in the market. Games like GTA 5 and Modern Warfare 2 manage sales figures like these over all contemporary platforms. We live in a time where many of these sales are driven by pricey marketing, ads during the Super Bowl and other TV spots, sponsorships, and from other large companies and coverage from related news outlets. Game developers who don't have revenue to throw at massive marketing campaigns need to be both creative and arguably incredibly lucky to break through the uppermost layer of coverage and reach mainstream audiences. Looking at PUBG as a case study for this, it seems somewhat of a perfect storm, whether by design or not. These are the factors I believe contributed to the runaway success of Bluehole's creation. Brendan Green, otherwise known as PlayerUnknown, is a recognisable name within the Battle Royale genre. Brendan is the author of the popular Arma 2 mod, DayZ Battle Royale, a separate creation from DayZ proper. Branding the game very explicitly with Brendan's online alias immediately captures the attention of the player base for both his own mod and other games which sprang forth from it, such as H1Z1 King of the Kill, for which Green acted as consultant. H1Z1 is by no means a niche game, reaching an all-time peak player count of 150,000 players and a substantial viewership on Twitch, though pales in comparison to what PUBG has achieved in a shorter time frame. Directing the attention of pre-existing Battle Royale fans to PUBG with that branding was likely a powerful influencer of the game's initial coverage and exposure.
Come on, fight me. Oh wow. Oh lord.
YouTube personalities picked up the game and began playing after initial word of mouth garnered the game some limited exposure in the Battle Royale fanbase. It's hard to quantify just how many sales coverage by YouTube channels can induce, though it is hard to deny that this would have had an impact on sales figures. Anecdotally, it was at this level of exposure that I personally became aware of the game's existence after I saw Jack Frags playing the game. Gameplay highlights from many mid to large sized YouTube channels with between tens of thousands and several 100,000 viewers became ubiquitous very quickly, bringing the game to the attention of potentially millions of gamers.
What are you thinking? Like, don't you know you're going against the best sniper in the game? Huh? Don't you know you're going against the best?
Tying into the previous idea of YouTube channel coverage, the nature of PUBG also lends itself well to streaming. PUBG quickly became one of the most viewed games on Twitch, and eventually often became the most viewed game on the platform at a given time. Famous faces from the streaming scene for other games like CSGO, such as Summit1G, began carving out a sizable audience for PUBG on the site, racking up millions of reliable viewers in a very short time. This is important, as reliable viewers are going to be more likely to invest in the game themselves because of their regular exposure to the game, particularly when watching big personalities and talents in the scene win games in new and creative ways, or acting out when losing.
Jeez, oh my god.
Scheiße. Ich hab dich getroffen.
What is that? What the fuck is that? What is that, Private Pie?
PUBG executed on the demand for something new. Other Battle Royale games were sometimes offshoots of existing games, usually with poorly translated mechanics that weren't a solid fit for a Battle Royale game. In other cases, other Battle Royale games were introduced to the public in a state of technical disarray, leaving sour and negative first impressions, which strongly curbed the growth of the game down the line. PUBG, on the other hand, was built from the ground up as a Battle Royale game, and was first released in a fully playable and relatively polished state. PUBG is by no means a technical marvel as of right now, and has its fair share of bugs, but in comparison to its competition, PUBG at its early access launch was executed so well that coverage of the game centered solely on how fun it is instead of how poorly it runs, how many technical issues the servers were having, or other negative portrayals. It is incredibly important for new games from smaller studios to carry a high degree of momentum on launch, because initial sales can be killed off easily, and new interest is hard to generate as a function of the lack of conventional marketing. The complete runaway success of the game speaks to the demand in the market for new and polished experiences, and should give AAA publishers pause in knowing that they did not themselves capitalise on the opportunity. Likely because trying new things is inherently risky, but friggin' Space Marines are like, forever bro. But, the perceptive viewer asks, what exactly is new about Battle Royale compared to other games on the market, particularly those published by AAA developers? It's a great question, but in my eyes, it's that the genre melds scope and accountability in a multiplayer shooter in a way that no other shooters available today manage. Consider this for a moment. In August of 2017, 5 months after the initial launch of PUBG into early access and 8 million sales in, 55% of the game's player base also played CSGO. This chunk of players used to play 50% more CSGO than average, but as of August 2017, they played 30% less. By answering the question of why CSGO players were observed hopping over to PUBG, we can also touch upon what PUBG does that is new that no other genre of shooter is managing today. CSGO is a tightly focused game in which success is based on accountability. Players need to contribute strongly to their team to do well, since they make up such a large portion of the team. Personal accountability does a few things for CSGO which helps it to lock in an audience of its own, which is irrespective of other AAA shooters like Battlefield and COD. For the average player, it produces a sense of reward for winning since you have such a tangible sense of purpose and impact within the game. This stands in contrast to games like Battlefield, which, whilst fun in its own right, does not create the same sense of reward for winning a match since a player's contribution to the overall outcome of the game is greatly diluted as more players are added to the mix. This is something that older COD games like the original Modern Warfare hit upon very well, but have lost focus upon in recent years as map design and spawn systems have damaged the fairness of the game in comparison to games like CSGO. Personal accountability is also a large part of the reason the game is so well suited to streaming, since viewers can invest their time into specific streamers whom they like because they want to see them succeed based on their skill alone. From my perspective, having characters like this is a part of the reason CSGO succeeds as an esport, since players can invest in the Pashas and the Flushes of the scene, where there is no analogue for this in other shooters like Battlefield. But where CSGO and PUBG differ is in scope and scale, with PUBG approaching or exceeding the scale of other shooters like PlanetSide Armor or Battlefield. Large-scale games require a more diverse set of mechanics, think looting, driving, shooting, route planning, stealth, etc., from which organic gameplay can arise. Focus groups, as well as the mainstream audience in general, place value in scale in new games, and to me this is largely because of this idea of larger games having more organic play. This is why much of Battlefield 4's branding and marketing took such a focus on Battlefield moments, and selling the game based on the size of its maps and the number of players in each round. PUBG and the Battle Royale genre proposed something new by bridging the gap between scale and personal accountability. The map is huge, the number of players on each server is an order of magnitude larger than for CSGO, but the stakes are still large, and so the reward is still sweet, as in Counter-Strike, leading to much of the player base hopping over to PUBG. Price point is a simple one. Convincing players to invest into something new, which has historically been poorly executed upon, is difficult, particularly at the usual $60 price point. At $30, the investment is less risky and more stomachable. That's not to say PUBG could have been sold at $60, I don't think that would be true, but at the point of sale it's definitely a compelling pitch compared to other $60 titles with extra season passes, especially if you're seeing more praise and coverage for PUBG than for the other titles. At the mention of good PR and transparency, you might hear the sound of metal rattling, and that's because a good portion of the people watching just raised their pitchforks and are getting ready to point out that Bluehole and Brendan Green have levied a lot of bad PR on themselves since the game launched. They'd be right, but hear me out. A lot of the indiscretions made by the developers came out after the game had already sold several million copies, and so the success of the game is debatably independent of these events. Before the wave of controversies that Bluehole and Brendan had participated in creating and fueling, The team actually did a lot of good work, and still continue to do so when they're not busy taking a goddamn machine gun to their own feet in building good PR. The developers were very transparent in their update schedules and plans for each update, detailing and showing off new features that will be coming to the game. Bug fixes, new weapons and vehicles, new maps, and expected timeframes for the release of all of these were usually given in a very upfront manner, which brought a great deal of goodwill from the community. All too often do AAA studios and publishers act in near secrecy, with the minimal feed forward and feedback from the community taken, so when developers were very publicly addressing topics about the game in a very timely way, it was quickly noted by the community, and also by much of the new media. 2 million sales into the game, and Bluehole were also publicly engaging with charity drives from the community and matching donations to gamers' outreach, being reported on by gaming outlets and generating yet more exposure for the game as the story rose on sites like Reddit. Since March, the developers have also regularly added new weapons and vehicles to the game, being careful to make sure additions to the game serve a purpose and usually fill a niche that was otherwise unaccounted for. This should be what is expected of developers launching a game in early access, though in reality causes PUBG to stand out from other titles in the Battle Royale genre and early access scene at large, and also from other large AAA titles where many additions to the game are added for the sakes of addition, and feature creep and bloating is a real problem. As I've alluded to, PUBG isn't a perfect title though. Whether unintentional or otherwise, Bluehole and Brendan Green have kicked up a not insignificant amount of dirt since release. Between overpromising on some timeframes, negative interactions with the community, and obvious pandering to popular streamers, a very premature focus on esports tournaments, in-game ads and paid loot boxes, and a litany of frustrating bugs, PUBG has its fair share of issues. Other than bugs, which weren't unexpected in an early access title though, practically all of these issues came to mainstream attention well after the launch window of the game had passed. Ignoring all else, I think PUBG represents something of importance to gamers and AAA publishers, and that is that you don't need AAA resources to produce record-breaking games anymore, that there is reward in taking risks and investing in new talent, and that individuals with a vision can still change the industry forever. If you like the video, feel free to like and subscribe, and drop a comment below on why you think PUBG succeeded as spectacularly as it did, and what you want to see from PUBG in the future. Thanks for watching, see you guys in the next one.